The main issue is that your ECs are boring. For the most part, that is what I see over and over with my students, right? And if your ECs are boring, it means you are LMO like many others and you cannot stand out. The issue is grades are not memorable, right? So you might have a perfect score on your SATs, but that doesn't make me remember you. What makes me remember you are the things you do in your extracurriculars, as well as the story that you tell at the end of this, right? So I want to show you a quick picture here, which I think is pretty telling of how you should think about this. Okay, so think of this as being well-rounded. This means you're good at everything, and that's your one chart. Here is the other chart, right? Where one part of your persona is just so extreme and very different than everybody else. And this is what we call a spike. And this is ideally what we want each person to have. It might be smaller, bigger, whatever that might be, but you should have something you're deeply passionate about. And that's what we're going to talk about here as we go forward, okay? Okay, so I'm going to go through with you 6 winning strategies, okay? So the first is that you need to find your passion. And finding your passion has become this thing of, well, I don't know what I want to do with my life. It sounds very negative, but I'm not expecting you to wake up one day and say, oh, I want to study ants, right? What this is about is you find what your interests are and you pursue them. And over time, those will grow into being something that's more meaningful. So if you remember during my earlier talk about what kind of students get accepted to Harvard, you would remember Scott. If you think about Scott, everything he did was not that difficult on its own, right? Starting a blog, anybody can do that. But it was over time that he was able to get these awards and stand out there, right? Let's take our ballerina. She didn't just get accepted to a pre-professional program, right? She started at 3 years old, and then she started practicing 30 hours a week and so on until she reached that point. So what I'm telling you is find your interest, go after it deep, and every year think about how can you do something more to add on to that interest. And over time, as you become better and better at something, you will naturally find that will become your passion, right? The second thing I want to talk about here that's a winning strategy is becoming a specialist. So it's very similar to what we just talked about. If you have a passion, then you can become a perfectionist at that passion, right? Let me give you a few more examples of children that I have met in my time. One was, as I called her, was the charitable farmer. So she had basically planted this garden on the rooftop of her mother's terrace. She used to document that via Instagram, and she actually got a lot of people watching how you can do different things to grow vegetables, flowers, and so on. She also started a farmer's market within her community where people could bring their produce, especially farmers who didn't have an outlet to sell. And she would sell that to her society as well as many others. And finally, all of this money that she made, she used to use for donating to underprivileged schools, specifically food for them. And so it really showed that she had this deep passion for her love of gardening. And I think that's something that we keep on harboring on, become a specialist, right? Another example is a girl who was a musician, okay? She wasn't good enough to become the best musician in India. She wasn't capable of winning an award of any such. So what she did instead is she had this band, which she was in with 3 other people. They started taking gigs at local joints. Before they knew it, they gained some popularity and they got some press saying that they were this young high school students and they had put together this vast following of people who came to hear them. Then she went and started basically teaching her guitar at a school nearby. And she ended up running fundraisers in order to get money, which she then used to donate instruments to these children. And that ended up having a profound aspect to the development of these kids because suddenly they had an outlet, and music, as you know, is a way that all people can unite, right? Again, nothing was particularly difficult, but she proved through 3 or 4 different activities that she loved music so much. Okay, so the third part is basically creating an extracurricular experience. And this is where I'm going to show you the holy grail, okay? Everybody is surprised to see this chart, and I think that it's very helpful. If you look at this, we have a few different tiers, okay? follow along with me while you look at the slide. So you can think of your activities in terms of 4 tiers, tier 1 through tier 4. As you will see, tier 1 is very difficult and very less number of children get into this. Tier 4 is very easy, right? So let's go over some examples that'll make it a little clearer for you. So if, go into tier 1, we're looking at the examples. So if you're a nationally ranked musician or a nationally ranked athlete, right? If you internationally win the Science Olympiad, these are considered tier 1 activities. If you're a founder of something that you've started that has made some impact in the community, again, a tier 1 activity, right? Tier 2 comes to something like your student council president, okay? Again, it's a very difficult position to get to, but it makes you stand out. It's a leadership role. You can also say that you're now a regional winner or a statewide winner of an extracurricular, whether that's math or science or even an athletic event, right? But again, to be tier 2, it needs to be regional or citywide, and to be a tier 1, it needs to be national and international, okay? Tier 3 and tier 4 are a lot easier, right? Tier 3 is you might have a leadership role, but you are just a supporting member of the team. So you are basically a treasurer for your school newspaper, okay? Or maybe you're an athlete, a varsity athlete. Now, some children always ask me, yeah, but I spend hours playing football after school. I win competitions, I participate, I practice maybe 10, 20 hours a week. The problem is in the United States alone, forget all the other countries that are applying, there are 37,000 high schools, okay? If you went to a high school like mine, we had 3 seasons, and for each season we had 20 teams, and for each team we had a freshman, a junior, and a varsity team. So you're talking about hundreds of thousands or lakhs of children. So to be an athlete doesn't actually contribute a lot to your application, but it takes a lot of time, okay? And number 4 is where you just join another club. So you're part of the Model UN club, but you haven't taken a leadership role. Maybe you have a hobby like you like baking and you sell a little bit of your baked goods to your neighbors, but you haven't really decided to progress with that activity, right? So that leaves you in tier 4. I think the easiest way to decide whether something is tier 1 or tier 4 is to ask yourself, how anxious do you feel when you do this? So if you just have to go to swim club practice, you're probably not very nervous, right? But if I tell you that you need to take swim club and start putting it at an international scale, you're gonna freak out, right? Same thing with your hobby. You don't mind baking cookies in your kitchen. But if I tell you that you need to now take those cookies and start selling 10,000 of them every year, again, you're going to be totally anxious about how it is that you're going to do that. That anxiety is basically an indicator of how difficult something is, right? The universities are basically expecting that you consistently push yourself. So if you are doing easy things, remember, easy won't get you into the top schools, right? You need to do things that show that you care about pushing yourself and making yourself grow over time, okay? So tier 1 through 4, right? And the reason why we have these different tiers is that we don't expect every single tier to stand out. So if you see in tier 1, I said you can have 0 to 1, and tier 4, you can have a few. And what that means is that I don't need 10 outstanding activities, right? What we call this is an extracurricular experience. So again, take a look at the screen and you'll get an idea. These different bubbles represent how difficult the activity was or how powerful the activity was. So if you see, a co-founder of a computer science club is a tier 2, right? Somebody who won regionally in the Indian space competition is a tier 2, right? And then there's little smaller things. He did an internship at an unknown company, so that's maybe a tier 3. He did a computer science project with an orphanage where he created their website. That's again probably a tier 3. But the point is that because he has 4 activities, it makes this entire storyline about how he's truly dedicated to computer science. And that's what we're talking about with your extracurricular experience. This helps you escape the need to be the best, right? That one, if you remember in our Harvard, it's very hard to become a 1, less than 1% of students do that. But instead, just create a bunch of little activities and at least one of those that you can excel at. And that'll still make your application stand out because I still see you as a unique individual who's obsessed with computer science, for example, in this case. Okay, so we have a few more tips here that I want to share with you. Number 4 is protect your time. So we talked about this, but you need to cut out those unimpressive, unimpactful activities, right? So like I said, technically being on the basketball team will not help your application very much. Now, if you want to do it because you find true joy in it, by all means, please go for it. I am just letting you know that you will not see a lot of impact on your application unless you're going at the national or international level. And so now you choose. You want to keep this, that's absolutely fine. You rather do something that's more strategic, then that's what you should do with your time, okay? The 5th point here that's a winning strategy is to focus on consecutive growth. So we've talked about that a little. I want you again to take a look at my screen here. So I've just documented how Scott's done it. And basically what Scott has done is the first thing he did was really easy. He started a blog. There's 1,000 technology platforms you can use today that will help you make a blog, right? The next thing he did was probably also a little more difficult, but not so extreme, right? He went and talked to his friends at other schools and he said, can you post on this blog, right? And that gave him more confidence. From there, he then decided that he was going to try to apply for multiple publications, which he did, and he got accepted. But what you don't see, kids, is that he might have written into 500 different publications, right? He might have tried for 2 years to get published, and he finally did. But the only thing we see is that he got published, right? So there is a lot going on behind the scenes, but just keep on improving upon what you've done previously, and you will climb up that mountain on your own. You will see how it works for you. The last winning strategy I have is put yourself out there. I talked a little bit about it, the snowball effect. So the more you go out there, the more things will come your way. If something comes your way which you just cannot turn down, something like I had a student who wanted to be on MasterChef and she had an opportunity to audition, but she was really scared because she didn't know how she was going to keep her grades up if she got accepted. The thing is, you should just do it because, like I said, your grades are not going to be memorable, right? You will have to work doubly hard, but it could be something that could be the make or break of your application, right? Don't get stuck. Go out there, do scary things, and that you will see will pay off when you're writing your application, okay? Let's review again these 6 points that I have up on my screen again. The first is follow your passion. The second is you have to become a specialist. The third is build an extracurricular experience. The fourth is save your time. The fifth is focus on consecutive growth. And the last 6 is put yourself out there, okay? So these are your winning strategies.